In March 2026, a team of researchers announced something that stopped the archaeological world cold. They had confirmed the age of a hand stencil on a wall of a cave in Indonesia, 67,800 years old. Not 6,000, not 16,000, not even 36,000. 67,800 years old, making it the oldest known art ever created by anything on this planet. But the age is not the part that has researchers most unsettled. It is the shape of the hand. The cave is located on the island Sulawesi in Indonesia. Sulawesi has become one of the most significant sites in prehistoric archaeology over the past decades. Previous discoveries there had already pushed back the known timeline of human artistic expression. Earlier hand stencils and animal paintings at the Sulawesi caves had been dated to around 45,000 years ago, making them among the oldest known art in the world at the time. This new confirmation blows those dates out of the water entirely. The hand stencil was created using a technique that prehistoric artists used consistently across tens of thousands of years and across multiple continents. A hand placed against a wall. In this case, a red ochre compound, blown or applied around it. Then the hand removed, leaving a negative image of the hand permanently on the rock. The researchers used a dating technique called uranium series dating applied to the calcite crust that had formed over the stencil. That crust formed after the art was made, meaning the art itself is older than the crust dating. The confirmed age of the crust gives a minimum age of the stencil behind it. 67,800 years minimum. The actual age of the stencil could be older still. Now here's where I need you to pay close attention, because the implications of that date are not just historically significant. They're genuinely difficult to explain within the framework that mainstream science uses to understand human development. And they become even harder to explain when you look at the shape of the hand itself. The hand on that cave wall does not look quite right. And what researchers said about it when they examined it closely, that's the part of this story that changes the question entirely. And we'll get to that in a moment, but first you need to understand why the date alone is already a problem. 67,800 years ago sits in a period called the Upper Paleolithic, the Stone Age. And the conventional model of human cognitive development places the emergence of what scientists call behavioral modernity, the capacity for symbolic thinking, abstract reasoning, spiritual awareness, and deliberate artistic expression, at somewhere between 40,000 and 50,000 years ago. That timeline is not arbitrary. It's based on the archaeological record as we previously understood it. It's based on the oldest confirmed tools showing deliberate design, the oldest confirmed art, the oldest confirmed evidence of ritual burial and symbolic behavior. Most of that evidence is clustered around the 40,000 to 50,000 year window. A hand stencil dating to 67,800 years ago does not fit that window. It predates it by nearly 20,000 years. Now correct me if I'm wrong, but 20,000 is not just a rounding error. It's longer than the entirety of recorded human history. It means that whatever cognitive capacity is required to decide to make art, to look at a cave wall and think, I want to leave a mark there. I want to create something that represents me. I want to make something that will outlast me. That capacity existed in our ancestors almost 70,000 years ago. And that forces us to ask a fundamental question. If humans were cognitively capable of artistic expression 67,800 years ago, what else were they capable of that we have not found evidence of yet? What other aspects of behavioral modernity were present in this period that archaeological record has not preserved? And then the shape of the hand. The researchers that examined the stencil noticed something that has generated significant discussion in the weeks since the announcement. Something about the proportions. Something that does not look quite the way a modern human hand should look. I want to show you exactly what they described. Because if the hand on the cave wall did not belong to a modern human, then the question of who made the world's oldest art becomes an entirely different conversation. And it connects to something that researchers in a very different field have been quietly discussing for years. Now let's talk about the hand itself. The research team describing the stencil noted that it has an unusual claw-like appearance. The fingers are elongated, The proportions are not typical for a modern human hand. The researchers described it as hinting at an early symbolic thinking and possibly spiritual practice, which is careful academic language that leaves room for multiple interpretations. There are conventional explanations for why a hand stencil might look unusual. The positioning of the hand on the wall, the angle of the pigment application, deliberate stylization by the artist. These are all reasonable possibilities, and mainstream researchers favor them. But the claw-like description has generated a few different conversations in research circles outside of mainstream archaeology. Because there is a documented category of prehistoric art, found across multiple continents at multiple sites spanning tens of thousands of years, in which hands are depicted with non-standard proportions. Too many fingers, too few fingers, elongated digits, unusual shapes that don't match the artist's hands who presumably made them. Some researchers have proposed the anomalous hand depictions represent deliberate artistic stylization, and some have suggested that they may document actual anatomical differences in populations we have not fully characterized. A small number of researchers, working at the intersection of archaeology and the broader question of non-human presence in the ancient world, have noted that the consistent appearance of unusual hand imagery across ancient cultures worldwide is a pattern that deserves more attention than it currently receives. I'm not here to tell you that a 67,800-year-old claw-like hand stencil was made by something other than a human being. But the location of this cave and what was found at other prehistoric sites across Sulawesi and the surrounding region connects to a much larger story about this part of the world. A story that researchers have been piecing together for years. And it points towards the possibility that the conventional model of human origins has been struggling to accommodate for a very long time. The island of Flores, just to the south of Sulawesi, is where researchers discovered Homo floresiensis in 2003, a separate species of human, small, with a brain roughly the size of a chimpanzee, that survived until approximately 50,000 years ago, possibly later. The discovery of Homo floresiensis shattered the assumption that modern Homo sapiens were the only humans on Earth during the period when this art was being made. We were not alone on this planet 67,800 years ago. We shared it with at least one other human species in this region, and possibly more. The DNA evidence from the past decade has added another layer to this picture. Modern humans carry genetic material from Neanderthals, confirming interbreeding between species. Some populations carry genetic material from a group called the Denisovans, another human relative whose physical remains are so sparse we can barely describe what they look like. And recent analysis has identified genetic signatures in some human populations that do not match any known human ancestor, suggesting there may be at least one more human relative out there we have not yet fully identified. 67,800 years ago in a cave in Sulawesi, something pressed its hand against the wall and created an image. We now know that multiple species of human-related beings were present in that region at the time, but we do not know with certainty which one made that artwork. But here's what we do know. Whoever or whatever made it was doing something that we have always assumed was uniquely human. Something that implies not just intelligence, but awareness, self-awareness, the understanding that you exist, that you can leave a trace of your existence, that leaving that trace means something. And that is the question. Who made these? Simple, unanswered, and more significant than it first might appear. Survival does not require art. A hand pressed against a cave wall and outlined in pigment does not help you find food. It does not protect you from predators. It doesn't keep you warm. It doesn't serve any practical function that evolution would directly select for. It serves a different kind of function entirely, one that requires a being to have a concept of self, to understand that the image on the wall represents them, to want that representation to exist, and to believe, on some level, that making it matters. That is not animal behavior. It's not instinct. It's the first evidence of something we have never found a satisfying explanation for. The human capacity to reach beyond immediate survival towards something larger, something symbolic, something that might fairly be called spiritual. 67,800 years ago, in a cave in Indonesia, by something that may or may not have been exactly like us. The conventional model says this is earlier than expected, but ultimately consistent with human cognitive development, just pushed back further than we previously knew. But there is another way to interpret this discovery, one that connects to everything this channel has been exploring across multiple series. If the capacity for symbolic thought, for art, for ritual, for spiritual awareness existed almost 70,000 years ago, then the question of where that capacity came from becomes urgent in a new way. Because that's not a capacity that appears gradually in the fossil record. It appears suddenly, fully formed, expressed in a cave in Sulawesi by pressing their hand against the wall and deciding that the mark they left has a meaning. Where did that impulse come from? That's the question this discovery raises that nobody in mainstream science is currently able to answer. The world's oldest art is now 67,800 years old, found in a cave in Indonesia, made by something that looked at a wall and decided to leave a mark that would outlast everything else about its existence. We don't know why. We don't know exactly who. We don't know what they believed or what that mark meant to them. What we know is that they did it, and that the impulse to do it, to reach beyond survival towards something symbolic, something lasting, something that says, I was here, is the same impulse that built the pyramids, that carved the Anunnaki into clay tablets, that wrote the Book of Enoch, that pressed a hand against the cave wall in Sulawesi 70,000 years ago. That impulse is the thread that runs through everything on this channel, and we are nowhere near done pulling it. Thank you so much for your time. Please subscribe and drop a comment. What do you think that hand means? Who do you think made it? And why do you think they made it? Until next time, I'll talk to you later.